Hey guys, this is Zach back here with another episode of Clutch Crew Sports. Today, the episode is primarily going to be featured on NFC North talk. So, similarly to the last episode about the NFC East, we're going to go through each team. All of us are going to talk about ceilings and floors, highlights, certain players that we think are undervalued, overhyped, etc. And today's a unique episode because we've got four people in the call here talking. So it's myself, Connor, and Eric who have been the main hosts in past episodes, and we'd like to welcome in my friend Nathan to the show, as this is his first episode with Clutch Crew Sports. So welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here a little bit more often in the fall to talk about some football.
Awesome, dude. So let's jump right into the video here. And I do want to start the video with a question we got on Twitter. I tweeted out a couple hours ago. If you got any questions about the NFC North, comment below and we'll answer them. And Anthony and Alex, who run their own podcast, asked the question, where does Mitch Trubisky rank in the quarterback power rankings? And we've got, between all four of us, we've talked about this before the episode started, and we're kind of on two different sides of the stick here. And it's me, Eric, and Connor all kind of in consensus that we would rank him for the entire quarterbacks in the NFL around the 20s to 25 range, and definitely the last for the division. So we would rank the three other quarterbacks ahead of him, whereas Nathan has got him ranked up at, I believe, 15, and
Yeah.
the third quarterback in the North, right?
Second.
Yeah,
Oh,
second.
Second?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'll let Connor, answer why we think that he's around 20 to 25.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much based kind of solely on the fact that he's unproven. I mean, if you're just going off of stats last year, then yeah, obviously he should probably be higher because he had a really good season last year. The Bears won the North, blah, 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 blah. But since he's still a young quarterback, he's unproven, it's kind of hard to rank him above even some guys who didn't even play much last year, like Joe Flacco, for example. I was telling these guys before that, Joe Flacco didn't play that much last year. He got benched for Lamar Jackson. But I would still rank Joe Flacco ahead of Mitch Trubisky just because of his track record with the Ravens. And, he's a veteran quarterback. He's serviceable. He's not bad. He's just a regular serviceable quarterback. Because, yeah, you look, Jack's got the stats pulled up right now. I mean, for a young quarterback, 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and a 95 rating. That's pretty good stats. So, but again, just the unprovenness, and especially in the division, when you're looking at, obviously, Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. Matthew Stafford has been the franchise quarterback with Detroit for a long time now. And the most iffy I was on was the Kirk Cousins one, but Kirk Cousins has proved himself a little bit more. So I think that's why me, Zach, and Eric are ranking him as the fourth in the division and kind of around 20 to 25 range overall on the quarterback rankings.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, and I do want to say he definitely increased his play from his rookie season, which you would hope for. That's a positive sign that he did much better. His rookie season, he had 7 touchdowns and 7 interceptions with a rating of 77, 2,000 yards, about 60% completion rating, which is not very good. But he did have a much better year last year, but that touchdown interception ratio is still not favorable in my eyes. And
yeah, I mean, it's like 1 interception per 2 touchdowns, basically.
The rating is pretty good, and the completion percentage got better, yards got better, but to me, he's still, like Connor said, he's still got to prove it for a couple more years before I can rank him above some of those players, but he's definitely got potential for sure. But Eric, if you have anything to comment on him.
Uh, yeah, I think you guys have pretty much hit the nail on the head. It's hard for me to not rank him above last in the division, not because he's not a good player or anything, but between Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, and Aaron Rodgers, I have a hard time moving him up above any of them. Kirk Cousins didn't have the greatest year last year, so I could see Mitchell Trubisky possibly having a better year this upcoming season than Kirk Cousins possibly, but I don't see him doing better than Rodgers or Stafford. But at the same time, I just as Zach and Connor both said, he's just got to prove himself. I believe that he can. I just haven't seen it yet, so that's the only reason why I've still got him in the low 20s in my QB rankings. But I'm excited to see how he plays next year. So he's got a good chance, but he's in a tough division. So we'll see.
All right. Yeah. All right, Nate. Tell us why you think he's going to be so much better than we think.
So I agree with what most of what you guys are saying about he really hasn't proven himself that much yet. He had a great year last year, I thought, but I think the reason why I rate him a little bit higher just based off his potential as far as being all the tools he has and mobility. I think going into his third year, second year in Matt Nagy's system, I think he's got a lot of room for improvement. I'm just ranking him based on going into next year of quarterbacks I would want to have on my team. I would prefer him over Kirk Cousins or Matt Stafford in this point of their careers. I also was factoring in his rushing yards too. He had like 420, I believe, last year, and like 4 or 5 touchdowns. Yeah, But I think he adds that on the ground
That's
too.
true.
Which, of all the NFC North quarterbacks, if that's what we're kind of focusing on here, he definitely is the best on the ground as well. So I think taking that all into account, I think 15 is a solid spot for him going into next year.
I just love how Zach just Googled Mr. Trubisky rushing stats and his passing stats still came up.
Okay, here we go. So his rushing. Oh my God! Did they not have rushing yards here too? They just have passing yards.
That's just passing.
Oh, duh, man! I'm stupid. Okay, there it is. Rushing and receiving. Obviously, doesn't.
Yeah, there it is.
You're right. 421 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Oh man,
that's.
It's
he was 1 yard more than 420, but that was pretty good, man. If the fact that you're 1 yard away from his exact total rushing yards from
I knew roughly was around there.
Yeah.
But,
awesome.
Yeah, I'll agree with Nathan in the sense that based off of his potential, he could possibly finish around the 15 range. I just want to see, for me, just from what I've seen so far, that's the only reason why I can't put him there just yet. But if he, balls out and has a much better year this year, I'll definitely move him up higher in my QB rankings. I just haven't fully seen it yet. I want to see more consistency from him first, but he definitely does have the potential. He's still young, and like Nathan kind of said too, from Stafford and Cousins, we've seen what they can do. We've probably seen the best of what they can do, but Trubisky still has room to grow. So,
shout out to Madden 20 for rating Jameis Winston as a better quarterback than Mitch Trubisky.
Oh.
Wow.
I definitely disagree with that one. Okay. All right. So now we're gonna tell you guys kind of transition. We're gonna talk about the Bears first, but before that, we'll tell you guys our predictions for how the NFC North will play out. And my ranking is also going to be the same as Nathan's ranking. And we've got the Minnesota Vikings at number 1, the Detroit Lions at number 2, Chicago Bears at number 3, and Green Bay Packers at number 4. Connor's got the Chicago Bears at number 1, Detroit Lions at number 2, Minnesota Vikings at number 3, and Green Bay Packers at number 4. And then Eric's has got Chicago Bears number 1, Minnesota Vikings number 2, Green Bay Packers number 3, and Detroit Lions number 4. So a good amount of diversity between all of our picks, with the exception of mine and Nathan's being identical. So with that being said, Connor is the most confident with his Chicago pick at number 1. So I'll let him tell us why he's got Chicago number 1.
Well, first of all, I mean, just looking at how they were last year, I mean, I don't think going into last year, I don't think anybody thought Chicago was going to be the winner. Everybody thought the division was going to be between Minnesota and Green Bay, and then somehow out of nowhere, the Chicago Bears pull out I can't remember, what was their record last year? Were they 11-5 last year? I think they were.
I think they were 10-6.
They were actually 12-4. Nathan was right about that.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, they were 12-4, which
Stat
and
man.
they were they were 5-1 against the division, which is pretty good. And so it's obviously for me, it's kind of the lowest I'd rank them as second, but I have them as first because I think, like what Nathan was talking about earlier, I think Mitch Trubisky is going to take that next step, and I think he's going to be. I think he's going to do well. I think he's going to move up. I think he's got that combination of mobility and, being a decent thrower. He's kind of like if you're comparing him to quarterbacks in the division, he's definitely most like Aaron Rodgers in the sense that he's got the mobility to go with his throwing because you don't see Stafford and Cousins running around too much. So, and it adds another dimension to their game. And I think the other important part about the quarterback position in Chicago is, I don't think a lot of people talked about this a whole lot, but Chase Daniel was actually a pretty decent backup for them last year because I remember he had to play a couple games, and I remember them winning a couple of them. He played decently. Obviously, Chicago has a team around him too, so it wasn't all him, but they're in good shape, I think, when it comes to the quarterback position. If you look at the rest of their offense, obviously losing Jordan Howard was not ideal, but he really didn't play all that well last year. Everybody thought he was going to be a top 5 running back, and he just kind of disappointed. He was just serviceable. So, I mean, they got Mike Davis from Seattle, who played okay last year, and obviously Tariq Cohen is a good dual threat running back. He can't be an every down back for sure. Like, there's no way he'd ever be the starter, but he's that guy that can come in and give you that spark. And their wide receiver position also does not really inspire a whole lot of confidence in me as much. Allen Robinson's the number 1 guy, but obviously he's had his injury problems, and he played again okay last year. Taylor Gabriel is number 2, which I think of Taylor Gabriel as more of a slot receiver than than just like a number 2 receiver playing on the outside. So I'm not sure why they have him as number 2 there and Anthony Miller in the slot, but that's interesting to me. The Trey Burton's a good tight end, and the offensive line is decent, but what really sets Chicago apart for me in the sense that why I think they're going to win the division is the defense. The defense was what everybody talked about last year, and I think this defense has the potential to be the number 1 defense in the league next year. And we've seen it happen because there's all this talk about, is Trubisky going to fall off? We saw the Denver Broncos a few seasons ago with a pretty terrible offense, but they were carried to a Super Bowl victory by their number 1 defense. So, I mean, Khalil Mack is Khalil Mack, and the rest of the linebacking core with Roquan Smith, Danny Trevathan, and Leonard Floyd is one of the best linebacker quartets, I think, in the league. The defensive line is probably the only weakness, I'd say. I mean, Akeem Hicks is good. I don't think I've heard of the other 2 guys, but that'd be a little bit of a weakness. And then the secondary with Kyle Fuller, and they picked up HaHa Clinton Dix from Green Bay, or actually I think Washington. That says Washington right there. So
he was traded to Washington, played a couple games for him, but
right. But
most of his career is
most Green Bay,
mm-hmm.
And so, but I would have to give them I think a ceiling for Chicago would probably be I'd say NFC Championship. I think the defense is going to be that good that even if the offense isn't to where it could be, I think the defense can carry them that far. I don't know if they'll win the NFC Championship, but I think they can get there. A floor I would have to give them would be probably second in the division, like a 9-7 or an 8-8. Possibly contending for a wild card. Because I also wanted to mention this: the one factor for them that I think could kill them. I'm not going to talk about this a lot, but is the kicking situation. Obviously, Cody Parkey's gone, and they don't have a kicker right now, which is kind of important. So yeah. So ceiling NFC Championship and a floor of the second place 9-7 or 8-8, I think. So then I'll let Eric go next.
Yeah, I had a tough time deciding between whether I was going to pick the Bears to win the division or the Vikings to win the division. But I ultimately went with the Bears. And for the similar reason as Connor, just that I feel like this defense is really, really good. I was very impressed with how they played last year. They're returning most of their players, so they're going to be in pretty good sync with each other. I don't know if they'll necessarily be able to replicate their performance in the sense that they'll be as good as they were last year, but I definitely don't see them like dropping off majorly or anything. And I also, for the offense, I agree with Connor too that they don't necessarily have people that are going to blow you away on paper necessarily, but what I do like for them is that, similar to the defense, they've also got mostly the same players that they had last year, at least in terms of their key positions, other than like starting running back, I guess, with Jordan Howard being gone. But you still got Tariq Cohen, Mitch Trubisky has the same weapons. I know the wide receivers that Mitch Trubisky had in his rookie year were none of the same people that he had last year. So not only did he have to get used to a new coach and a new system, he also had to get used to completely new players last year. Whereas this year, he has Allen Robinson again. He has Taylor Gabriel again. He's got Tariq Cohen again. So I feel like the Bears are going to be able to be a more cohesive unit. And they were a missed field goal away from advancing in the playoffs last year. And who knows if they would have been able to beat the Saints or not. I mean, the Eagles almost did, so I feel like the Bears could have had a chance against them too. I mean, so I could see this Bears team having a similar season as last year. Now, as Connor said, it could be an issue with the kicking game maybe, and if the Bears like miss out on the playoffs or lose a playoff game again because of a missed field goal, I know they're going to be ready to like kill something over there in Chicago. That had to hurt watching them for Bears fans.
The double doink
field goal, yeah. But so I'm also like Connor. I'm going to give them a ceiling of NFC Championship game. I almost gave them a ceiling of Super Bowl appearance, but I don't know if I'm quite willing to go that far. And then I'm going to give them a floor of 9-7, like either wild card spot or just missing out on a wild card spot. I think this team's for real, and the only way I believe the floor would happen is if they have a bunch of injuries or something that affect them. But I feel pretty strongly with this team, so I will let whoever's going next get into the give their opinions on why the Bears won't win.
All right, so the reason I have the Bears at third kind of gets in my ceiling floor reasoning, so I guess I'll go into that first and then explain why. I agree with what everyone was saying beforehand about their defense. I think on paper is at least top 3 in the league, and I think they've got all that talent coming back on offense with another year in the system. They should be better there as well. So I think ceiling wise, I think they could make it. They could definitely win the division and potentially even make it to a Super Bowl. But my floor for them is very low. Like I mean, my floor for them would be 4 or 5 wins this year. I could see them coming in last in the division because when I look at this Bears team, I just think a lot about what happened to the Jags going from 2017 to 2018. I mean, that defense for the Jags in 2017 was probably one of the best I've ever seen. Stacked at every single position, and they were, a handful of plays from making the Super Bowl and potentially winning it. And then to go from that team with basically the exact same roster to winning, like 4 or 5 games last year. And obviously the Bears have a better quarterback and better offensive situation. But I think it's going to be hard for them to replicate their success from last year just because so much of it came off of all the great things their defense did with all the turnovers they had and the pick sixes and the fumbles and the sacks and all that. I think that's hard to replicate when you're like dependent on all that stuff for your success because that's hard to plan. You can't count on turnovers happening. So I have them picked to finish third in the division. It was close. I was flip-flopping all day with between them and the Lions. I don't have them I think they're kind of right neck and neck. I could see it going either way for second or third realistically, but I had to give the edge to the Lions just because I could totally see the Bears flaming out this year. So that was kind of my thoughts on the whole situation.
Yeah. So I tend to agree with Nathan more so than Eric and Connor on this pick because I do agree with him about the Jags comparison, but when I look at this team last year, their defense, they were so reliant on their defense. And this is what I don't like about teams that are so reliant on either offense or defense is that, you put all your eggs in that basket. And then if that side of the ball doesn't have, the number one or number two best season, then you're not going to win many games. And offensively, I'm really not a fan of their offense because their wide receivers, I mean, knock on wood that this doesn't happen, but Allen Robinson's got a long career history of injuries. Taylor Gabriel's a great slot guy, but I guess they have him at the end receiver and Anthony Miller in the slot. Riley Ridley is a rookie. Miller's coming off his second year, I believe. So they've got young guys there, not really proven, similar to Trubisky, not really proving. A lot of people compare him to Blake Bortles. Like Blake Bortles is like a poor man's Trubisky, but and the offensive line doesn't really scare you that much. It's got its pieces, it's solid, but it's not, superior or anything. And then defensively, they bring back much of their same defensive core, but I just don't see them having as good of a season as they did last year. I mean, I believe they were number one in takeaways. They got to be number one in sacks. I mean, they single-handedly.
The Steelers were actually number one in sacks, tied with the. I can't remember who they were tied with, but it was the Steelers and somebody else.
I think
it wasn't
Titans,
Chicago.
Maybe.
I think maybe. I'll look it up while you keep talking.
Okay, yeah. And in that Rams game that they had on Monday night, I think, the defense single-handedly won it for them. I don't think that's going to be the case next year when they have a rematch with the Rams in Los Angeles. I see that going the other way around. And I've got them third also. And another reason why I've got Detroit above them is schedule. And the schedule, is very important because Chicago won the division last year, which means they have a first-place schedule. So they have to play every first-place team in the NFC, which includes playing the Saints and Rams. And the Rams, they got to go on the road for. Whereas Detroit's going to be playing Arizona and Tampa Bay. That's a complete 180 in teams that you're playing. So Chicago's got a tougher schedule as far as that goes. And I just don't see their defense being able to replicate, like I said before. It's it's just going to be hard for them to have the same year that they did, and I believe they really are reliant on that defense too much. And so my ceiling and floor, though, I think they can still win the division. I don't have them fourth, so I could see them winning the division and then winning their wild card game, but I don't see them making it to the NFC Championship. And then my floor would be, I guess, like Nathan said, fourth place with like 5 wins maybe, but realistically, I see them more as like a 7-win, 8-win team. Just the Lions are not above them. So
but before you go on, back
Yeah.
to I told you I'd look it up. So they led the league in interceptions, and I believe with their fumbles, because they had 9 fumble recoveries, the leader had 14. But I think combined with their interceptions, they had the most turnovers, and they were tied for first in defensive touchdowns.
mhm.
And then with sacks, Pittsburgh and Kansas City were tied for first with
Oh,
52, and then Chicago and Minnesota were tied for third with 50.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean those are obviously great numbers to have. So we're moving on now to the Lions, and I'm going to be talking about them first. And the Lions I've got finishing second in the division. Last year they finished fourth, but I think this team is going to be a lot better this year. Offensively, I like them a lot better than Chicago. I like that Matthew Stafford, he's a proven veteran. While he's not going to take you to a Super Bowl, which I don't believe he will, he's not going to, suck for you. So I've got, him as probably the second best quarterback in the division. And then the weapons he has, I think, is a lot better than Chicago's weapons. I'm a big fan of Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones both. I didn't really know much about them especially Golladay. But, I mean, he lit up on the fantasy scene. Like, he was huge, a huge guy that kind of came from nowhere. Marvin Jones is a guy that, is pretty consistent. Well, I don't know if he's consistent, but if Galladay's not having a good game, Jones will step up and have a good game.
He's a deep threat, too.
Yeah, deep threat guy. And then they've got now Danny Amendola to fill their slot position, which I'd say he's like an average slot receiver, but it probably beats Jermaine Kearse, I don't know, they probably didn't have Kearse last year, but whoever they had last year at slot, I would say that he's an upgrade above. They've been drafting offensive line the past couple of drafts. So I like their offensive line a little bit more. And at tight end, it's going to be an interesting, to see how that plays out, because they brought in Jesse James from Pittsburgh, but they also spent, I believe, the number 8 pick on TJ Hawkinson. So Hawkinson is like kind of like an old school tight end where he's a really excellent blocker and he can catch the ball too. So he's not he's not like a tight end like Travis Kelce, who's like a pure kind of like a receiver tight end. He can block for you too. So having him in there,
another Steelers
like,
reference, kind of like Heath Miller in a way. Another Steelers reference there, but you're right. I'm talking about the old school. Give you a comparison, like Heath Miller, basically.
All right. Yep. And so he can almost be like an extra offensive lineman for him. And then looking at their running back position, Dio Riddick's nice, but Kerryon Johnson is a guy that came out of nowhere too as a rookie from Auburn, and he had a tremendous season last year. I believe he got injured at the end of it, but I expect great things from him. So I'm a big fan of that offense. I think they can put points up against Chicago. So looking at their defense now, the big addition, bringing in Trey Flowers from New England, one of probably their best edge rusher. It's no coincidence that Detroit is bringing in a lot of New England guys with that Matt Patricia, as their head coach, New England connection. So they're bringing in a lot of those guys. And then I'm a big fan of Darius Slay at cornerback. I think he's an underrated corner, and I can see him having a great year. Jared Davis from Florida, another guy that, I watch SEC football a lot, so I remember him. I think he's solid. And Ashawn Robinson at D tackle, he's all right. There's a lot of all right guys in here. Justin Coleman from Tennessee, I think he's pretty good as a nickelback. And they do have a kicker in Matt Prater. So I've got the Lions finishing second in the division. I can see that, it's hard to put the Lions to win the division based on the history of the team, but I guess for ceilings and stuff, I'll put them in there, and I'll say that they can win a playoff game. I think they could be a surprise team of the year that nobody's really talking about that ends up winning a playoff game, but I definitely don't see them making the NFC Championship. And my floor for them, similar to Chicago, I mean, they could prove me wrong and just have the same crappy season like they did last year, but
it is Detroit.
Yeah, so they definitely have the history of that. So the floor, I'll give like 4 or 5 wins, and then you're really going to be having a question about should Matthew Stafford stay on the team since he, has only taken them to the playoffs once, I believe. So I'll let Nathan kind of echo my thoughts too about Detroit.
Yeah, I'm really on the same page with Zach here on this one. I think that I really like the offensive weapons that they have around Stafford now. Like Zach was saying, Marvin Jones, Kenny Galladay, all those guys are pretty solid weapons on the outside. I think Amendola, he hasn't produced very much in the regular season lately, but he's reliable. Got sure hands and all that. I really like Kerryon Johnson and what they have with the running game now. Like Detroit, there was that stat going into the last year. They hadn't had a 100-yard rushing game or a single 100-yard rusher in like almost 2 years, I think, and they finally broke that. It was
more than that, actually.
Yeah, it was
forever.
Like
2015 with Reggie Bush.
Yeah, so it's been a long time coming from to actually have a running game to complement Matt Stafford. So I think that'll be big for them to have that all next year. And again, I also like their defense with Ashawn Robinson and now Trey Flowers on the D line, and I think Darius Slay's he doesn't get enough credit, I think, for being one of the top corners in the NFL. So I think both sides of the ball, they've got a lot more talent than people usually associate with the Lions. And I think that second place in the division is very realistic for them. I have them probably winning about 9 to 10 games. And depending on, I can see them second or third, just depending on how the matchups with the Bears go, whether they split those or where the outcome is. But ceiling-wise, I could definitely see them winning the division, or at least getting a wild card spot and making the playoffs. And then floor-wise, I could see them kind of just falling apart and not winning their. I think the big thing with the Lions is that they got to win those divisional games. I think that's gonna be a competitive division for them. So if they just fall apart against the Vikings and the Bears and drop those games versus the Packers that I think they should win, they could definitely. I can see their floor at being 4 to 5 games as well. But realistically, I'd say second place, right above the Bears.
Yeah, so I'm the same as these guys. I'm going to echo them a little bit. I have Detroit finishing second in the division. I kind of went back and forth with them between second and third. I originally had Minnesota, but about a day ago before we started this, I moved them into second over Minnesota. And yeah, I think it's mainly for me on the offense again, Kerryon Johnson. They finally have a running back. I mean, it was kind of like, if I'm looking at another team that's a bit of an example, you look at the Saints for years and years, had no running game, and it was Drew Brees was having to put up 30, 40 points every game to win games with them. Obviously, Matthew Stafford is no Drew Brees, but once Drew Brees got a running game, now you see the Saints as one of the top teams in the league the past couple of seasons because they finally got a running game. And the same with, Detroit's not going to have the same success, but now that they have a running game, they can take the burden off of Matthew Stafford's shoulders, and he doesn't have to win games for them. I think the TJ Hawkinson, Jesse James combo is going to be a really deadly tight end combo. I mean, Jesse James, he never set the world on fire in Pittsburgh, but he was kind of supposed to be that Heath Miller replacement. Like, he was just kind of the guy that was reliable and was there. You know, they brought him in to block, but if you needed someone to be open, he would be open. And Vance McDonald was kind of, you know, the main pass catcher. But I think having two tight ends, because normally you see teams these days, they'll have one tight end that's a big pass catcher and another one who is just kind of solely there for blocking. I think having two tight ends that can do both could be a really interesting and deadly combo. And then the defense, same thing. Trey Flowers is a great edge rusher. Darius Slay, I do think, is underrated. One guy that you guys didn't mention, Damon Harrison, he is a tremendous run stuffer. I mean, he's huge to start with, but he's probably one of the best run-stopping defensive tackles in the game.
True. Yeah.
So that adds, you know, not only can they get to the quarterback and stop the passing game, but they can stop the running game too. So I would have to give them a ceiling of they could win the division, but then lose in the wild card round. I'm not going to go as far as Zach and say they can win a playoff game. I think winning the division and losing in the wild card would be my ceiling. And then floor would be kind of the same as Zach and Nathan, like 5 or 6 wins, maybe which could be fourth in the division depending on some other factors, or third. But like 5 or 6 wins is my floor. And then, so I'll let Eric talk about why he thinks the Lions are going to finish last next year.
Yeah, well, I know if anyone's like listening to them, I think, man, 3 of them have them in second, then this one guy has them in last. But why is that? But for me, it's not that I necessarily think that the Lions are a bad team or anything. For me, the issue is I think on paper overall, if you just look at every division in general, this division is a really competitive division. This is a division to me where for any team, if like everything goes right, they could win, but also at the same time, if things go wrong, they could get last. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I had a really hard time picking my order with this, but I ultimately went with them being last. But like I said, not because I think they're bad. I just feel like the Bears and Vikings are better than them. And then I debated on whether I was going to put them third or fourth between them and Green Bay. But I think Detroit has a good team. And I really, going into the draft this current season, as a Jaguars fan, I really wanted them to draft TJ Hawkinson. I would have really liked to have him on our team and give Nick Foles a better weapon. But then when Josh Allen fell to us, I was totally fine with us taking him instead. But I think I like what Connor mentioned about TJ Hawkinson and Jesse James as a duo threaded tight end. They should definitely run a lot of 2 tight end sets, and with them both being capable blockers and route runners, it could be a mismatch for some defenses trying to figure out, you know, which one's going to go out for the pass, which one's going to block, where do they match up. So I do like that for them. But I guess ultimately the reason why I'm picking them last isn't necessarily because of a lack of talent or anything like that. Just for whatever reason, it seems like even when it looks like the Lions have been able to put what looks like a good team together, for whatever reason, they just haven't been able to deliver in the results column.
They pull a Detroit.
As Zach, I believe it was Zach that mentioned, you know, Matthew Stafford's only gotten into the playoffs one time, even when there's been some times where he's had some, you know, fairly loaded offenses around him.
Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, one of the best wide receivers of that era on his team and stuff like that. But at the same time, as the guys have said, even when they had Megatron at the time, they didn't have a running game then. I mean, I can't remember when the last time Detroit had 1,000-yard season with a running back. It's
Reggie Bush.
Yeah.
I said 2015 earlier. It was actually 2013. So even longer than I thought.
Okay.
It's been a while. I mean, I know most teams are going to a more of a running back by committee type of deal, but even then, there's still usually a good amount of 1,000-yard rushers every year. So I don't know, but I just don't trust Detroit. They haven't been able to prove to me that they can win yet. So I just don't have the confidence in them, but they could prove me wrong. And, honestly, I kind of hope they do because I'm not a Packers fan by any means. And, the Vikings, Vikings and Bears, I guess I'm neutral with them. But, as a fan of the Jaguars who went so long without having any success until we finally had that one good year a couple seasons ago. And I know Detroit hasn't won a playoff game in forever. So, I would love for them to prove me wrong here and make the playoffs and win a game or two. So I give them a ceiling of second in the division and maybe getting a wild card spot, but probably not winning the playoff game. And then I give them a floor of last in the division. As Nathan said, I think for the Lions to determine how well they do in this division is going to be how well they play their divisional games. They need to prove they can beat these other competitive teams in their division. So if they can do that, then they have a great chance. But if not, then they're in trouble.
All right, so
you want to talk about the Packers?
Going to the Packers now, since Eric has them finishing the highest of us.
I'm the only one that doesn't have the Packers in last place. Like I said earlier, I debated on whether I was going to put them last or Detroit last. So if they were to finish last, I would not necessarily be surprised. So going into the season, it's really tricky to evaluate the Packers for me because I definitely feel like they do not have as talented of a team as they've had in years past, but at the same time they still have Aaron Rodgers. So although I would say he hasn't played up to his standards the last couple of years, but he had some injuries and things like that. Like if he's fully healthy and he like I said, he's Aaron Rodgers, he's proven he's a great player. But one thing that's interesting for me that almost made me put them in last place is I heard that he had a lot of issues with Mike McCarthy, and that was like what led to him, being on the outs. But then I've also heard that he's already had issues with the new coach, Matt LaFleur, which is really interesting. I'm like, man, you've only had your first training camp and you're already at odds with your coach. So that
not good.
Now, obviously, I don't know how true that is. I mean, it's some rumors and stuff that have come out. So I mean, who knows if it's actually true or not? But for that to come out like this, something like that to come out this early is definitely concerning. So, but unlike the Lions, though, the Packers have been a team that even if it looks like they don't have a chance, they've still been able to find a way and do better than what they were projected to do. So I'm sticking them third, but I don't have a ton of confidence in this team. So I'm going to give them the same ceiling and floor as I gave the Lions. With Aaron Rodgers, you always have a chance. So I would say maybe I'm still only going to give them a ceiling of second in the division with a 9-7. But if they're already having issues with the coach and the players and stuff, they could easily fall apart and finish last. So that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. So with Green Bay, so I definitely have them finishing in the cellar. Before I go forward, I got to give Green Bay the award for best wide receiver names in the league. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Geronimo Allison, and Aquemius St. Brown. Good job on those names.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm with Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, he's a great quarterback, and you always have a chance with him. I just think that they've lost too many pieces. I mean, besides the great names, their only really good wide receiver is Devontae Adams. And I mean, they have that running back tandem going on with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, but it really hasn't proven to be that good. And Jimmy Graham certainly did not have a great season last year with them, so I'm not sure what they're going to do. I see they got Mercedes Lewis on there too, who's a super old man now. But
Yep.
Sports fans know about him.
Yeah. And then, I mean, and besides David Bakhtiari, I will say David Bakhtiari is one of the best offensive linemen in the league, but the rest of their offensive line really doesn't scare you at all. So, I mean, and obviously Aaron Rodgers is a mobile quarterback, but there's only so much you can avoid. And the defense is, I'm just going to say the defense is awful. Outside of Mike Daniels, they lost Clay Matthews in the offseason. The defense is terrible. I don't think they're going to be able to stop anybody out there. I mean, and especially in the division. I mean, with some of the offenses in the division, I don't think they can stop even the Bears. The Bears probably would have the worst offense on paper besides the Packers, I think, but I think they'll have trouble stopping even the Bears. So, and I think to go off of what Eric was saying with the rumors, from what I've heard, it's more so that when you've got a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, when you're thinking of building an offense, the idea is that you want to build the offense around Aaron Rodgers. Like, to suit Aaron Rodgers, he's a elite quarterback. You want to build the offense for him. From what I'm hearing, apparently, Matt LaFleur's trying to enter in his own offensive scheme, not taking Aaron Rodgers' skill set and his, past experience into account, and he's just trying to build it himself. And I think that's why Aaron Rodgers is going against him, and it's why I think they're going to fail, because if you're trying to build an offense all on your own, with a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, if you're not building it for him, it's just a recipe for disaster. I mean, I think we kind of saw that in back to Denver again, back the year they won the Super Bowl, why their offense was so terrible was because they tried to go away from Peyton Manning's skill set. They tried to make their own offense. And it's like when you have a quarterback like Peyton Manning, you build the offense for Peyton Manning, not around him. So I think I'll give the Packers a ceiling of probably honestly, I can't go any higher than 7-9. I think, which could probably at highest be third in this division with the competitiveness of it. So a ceiling of 7-9 and a floor of probably 3 or 4 wins. I mean, if everything goes wrong, because obviously Aaron Rodgers can still take you places, but if everything goes wrong, which I think is more likely this year than probably any other year, I'd say 3 or 4 wins could be a floor for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you guys have been saying. And looking at their offense, they have 3 elite players and 1 pretty good player. The elites being Devontae Adams, David Bakhtiari, and Aaron Rodgers. I always say David Bacteria when I see his name. I always think that's but he's better than Bacteria. I mean, if that shouldn't be a nickname for him. But and then Brian Bulaga's a pretty solid right tackle. But Jimmy Graham, in my opinion, is washed up. Mercedes Lewis, I don't want to say he's washed up because I'm a fan of his, but he's not. He's still a good blocking tight end, but that's about all he does. And then Jay Sternberger, like I said, I watch a lot of SEC football. He went to Texas A&M, and I wasn't really a fan of his. I was kind of surprised that he was drafted as high as he was. And the Packers are one of these teams that they have a history of drafting. They build their team through the draft, and they usually build it pretty well. And so I haven't been a fan of many of their recent draft picks, including Rashawn Gary, their first-round pick from last year's draft. Not a big fan of
actually.
This year. I meant to say this year's draft. I think Darnell Savage can be okay, but I mean they had a lot of top picks in this draft, and I don't think they hit on a lot of them. And I wasn't a fan of their corner picks last year. Jair Alexander, I don't think he had that great of a year, or Kevin King. And then the one guy that I do like that they have, no surprise, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, the former USF Bull. I was a fan. I'm obviously a fan of his, so I like that as their slot receiver. I think he should be their slot instead of this Geronimo Allison guy. But because he had some pretty solid games last year, Valdez-Scantling had, because they had a bunch of injuries and stuff. No Randall Cobb anymore, and like Connor said, defensively, this team doesn't scare you at all. I mean, all these offenses are going to be able to put up points against them, and I don't see it getting any better. And I'm not a Matt LaFleur fan. He didn't really do anything with the Rams. It was all Sean McVay, and for whatever reason, he wasn't even. I think he was the quarterback coach there. Then he gets moved to Tennessee as their offensive coordinator, where he's the play caller. They supposedly run an exotic smash mouth there. The stupidest thing I've ever
heard. We saw how that turned out last
year. Yeah. So did that really does that make him deserving of a head coaching job from 2 years ago being the quarterback's coach for the Rams? I'm not a big fan of it. And then don't get me started on Nathaniel Hackett, the former offensive coordinator for the Jags. I had completely forgotten about him until I saw him on this list here. Oh, man.
Still a job.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Jags got rid of him because their offense was so bad, but then Green Bay was like, let's bring him in. So I'm not a fan of that. But I don't
using some brains there.
But the thing is he's not even going to have any role because it's going to be, like you said, LaFleur is already him and Rodgers are clashing. That's not, good news at all. And so Aaron Rodgers for being a superstar, like Eric. I'm going to go with Eric Seelings and Floor. I think I'm going to say they could potentially win 7 wins. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but I could also, I think they'll finish 4th in the division. I have the other 3 teams. I have more confidence in the other 3 teams to finish above them. So the more we've been talking about it, the more I don't like this Packers team. so yeah, 3-4 wins. They're not going to be good next year.
All right. Yeah, I think we're all kind of the same consensus that the Packers aren't going to be very great. I had a hard time just making these rankings. It's hard to pick against Aaron Rodgers because he is so great, and he can make a lot out of not very much. But even by I think the Packers' offense has been gradually diminishing in talent to the point where now he has Devontae Adams and basically some guys are kind of mediocre receivers, and he's got basically the ghost of. Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't go against the USF guy when Zach's here.
Can't go against the Bulls. But
hey, he scored some against you guys that one year.
Oh, I'm saying I like him better than most people. I think a lot of people have never even heard of him, so I definitely give him credit for that. But just as a few years ago, we had Rodgers throwing to prime Jordy Nelson, Cobb, and Adams coming into the league. Yeah. To now the point where he's throwing to basically the ghosts of Jimmy Graham and Mercedes Lewis, and I can't see them. I think he can do a little bit more than what he should be able to just because of his talent level, but I don't see him being very good on offense and defense. Really, I recognize about 3 of these names. Mike Daniels and Blake Martinez are obviously studs, and Jair Alexander could potentially be a good cornerback if he takes a step forward, but I just don't think they have enough talent on either side of the ball to keep up with this division. I think ceiling-wise, they can maybe jump up to 3rd over either the Lions or Bears based on whoever's, better this year. But realistically, I see them coming in 4th, coming in dead last, and probably winning about 4 games tops, just based purely off of Aaron Rodgers carrying them. And then, so the next team, the Vikings, I had them picked to win the division. I think this year is the year they finally take the step forward. I think a lot of people had them picked to win last year, and a lot of folks even had them win the Super Bowl or one of their picks to represent the NFC. And I just like the talent they have all over the place. I think as far as wide receiver duos go, I'd have to pick, or I guess now the Browns have Odell, so maybe Odell and Jarvis might be one better, but I like their duo of Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs a lot. And obviously, Laquan Treadwell had that kind of top 10 talent. If he takes another step forward, that's a great trio for them. And they got Kyle Rudolph back and drafted Irv Smith, who I think is a really athletic tight end. And I think that I wasn't a big fan of the Kirk Cousins deal last year. I always thought he was a little bit average to get that kind of money. But I do think if he keeps being efficient and just at least is able to distribute the ball to all these talented players he has around him, I think it could be very good. Especially if Dalvin Cook comes back healthy and they get the ground game going, I think it's going to be a very well-rounded offense with all that talent they have, plus the upgrades they made to the O-line with Garrett Bradbury and signing Josh Klein. I think overall that's a very good offense. And defense, I think everyone talks about the Bears in their division, and I don't think people talk about the Vikings enough. Xavier Rhodes at cornerback is a guy I've been a fan of for a long time, and they managed to get Anthony Barr back on that team-friendly deal. A lot of people thought he was out of town, and I think that front seven with Barr, Everson Griffin, Linval Joseph, all those guys, I think that's very tough to run against, and we saw it against the pass too. So I just think overall this is a team that disappointed last year, but I think with a favorable schedule, they could definitely run through the division. I think it's realistic for them to win the NFC North, and I think my ceiling for them would be making the NFC Championship game. I don't know if I could pick them to win the Super Bowl right now. I think the Rams are still very strong, and they're coming back with a lot of their talent. I think it's tough to pick against the Rams right now, but I can see ceiling wise them making the NFC Championship game, and floor wise, I just think they have too much on paper right now to really be bad this year. I think they can compete with any team they go up against. So I'm going to give them the floor of 8 to 9 wins, kind of like their year last year was kind of a disappointment based on their preseason projections. I can see that type of year being the floor for them. But yeah, like I said, just kind of talent everywhere, and I have them winning the division.
Yeah, so I agree with you. Not surprised. Like I said earlier, Nathan and I have the same list, so there's not going to be a lot of disagreements between us.
Great minds think alike.
Yes.
I was
Sure.
pasted, copy and pasted.
I'm surprised that Nathan didn't talk about Mike Hughes.
That's what I was getting to. I knew I was forgetting someone.
Yeah, well, he's not listed on the first line, so you might not have seen him, but I'm sure you're a fan of his. And
I'll two pretty much. So that's another big addition they got coming back. Not to cut you off, but that's
fine.
Another reason got them highly rated, because he'll be a big addition out wide.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and, even with Cleveland, I'm going to say that this tandem, Diggs and Thielen, is the best, even with Cleveland, Landry and Odell Beckham. I mean, just the numbers that these guys put up, and they really complement each other too. Whereas like Diggs is like a deep threat guy, Thielen is like a reliable, trusty hands. He doesn't drop very many passes, and great route runner on mid routes, short routes, and then Diggs can take you over the top. And then Laquan Treadwell is a guy that hasn't really lived up to his potential. He was a first-round pick, but the speed that he's got to be like a slot receiver is tremendous. He's got tremendous speed. So if he can stay healthy, I think he could have a good year. And Kirk Cousins is a guy that I think gets unfairly criticized because of his contract, and rightfully so. I think his contract, he's overpaid, but I still don't think that makes him a bad quarterback. You know, he's not a clutch guy, so he's not gonna. I don't think he's one to take over games and pull off a bunch of fourth quarter, game-winning touchdowns like Aaron Rodgers has done. But he's a solid regular season quarterback, and I was looking at his stats before this. He had a way better year than Trubisky had, and we were all saying that Trubisky had, a pretty good year. He threw more touchdowns, threw less interceptions, threw more yards, had a higher completion percentage, had a higher QBR. He beat him in about every category last year. And with the weapons he's got compared to Chicago, I think there's no reason why that's going to change, why the quarterback rankings between him and Trubisky should change. And the offensive line, they've really put an emphasis on improving, drafting Bradbury at center, bringing in Klein. They've got Riley Reif. So the offensive line is, I'd put definitely in the top half of the league. And then this guy doesn't stay healthy a lot, but if he's healthy, Dalvin Cook, I think, can be an elite running back. And that's a big if. I do understand that. There's no, history says that he's going to get injured, but if he's healthy, the start of his rookie season, he was taking the league on fire. Like, he was having huge games, and he was a huge part of their success early on before he got that injury. And like Nathan said, defensively, they don't get talked about as much as the Bears do, because the Bears had such a great season last year. But, I don't, their depth, they might have gotten a little weaker on their depth, but their starters are still competitive with Chicago's defense. That defensive line is pretty stacked. And then they were able to bring back Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks. I think Xavier Rhodes is a little bit overrated, but Harrison Smith is an elite safety. And like Nathan was saying about Mike Hughes coming back, Trey Waynes, they've got a good secondary. I think they've got, I guess their coaching is Mike Zimmer and stuff, but I definitely can see the Vikings having a bounce back here because they were so overhyped last year. They still had an okay season. They didn't have like a complete failure of a season. So I think there's no reason why they can't bounce back after being humbled from a year like last year. And they do have an easier schedule, like Nathan said. They don't have to face New Orleans, and they don't have to face the Rams in the regular season. So that should give them a boost. And so I'm going to give kind of the same ceiling and floor. I think they can make it to the NFC Championship, but I wouldn't put them in the Super Bowl. And the floor, I could see them making the playoffs as a wild card team at like 9-7. So,
yeah, guys. So for me, I'm pretty sure I said this earlier, but I debated between whether to put the Bears number one or the Vikings number one. It was tough to say, but after the disappointment that the Vikings had last year, I have trouble putting them at number one. That's mainly the sole reason. But as Zach just said, they could definitely have a bounce back year. I would not be surprised if they were to win the division. Their offense is going to be really good. But as Zach mentioned too, for me, with their offense, it's going to come down to Dalvin Cook and whether he can stay healthy or not. Because when he's been healthy, he has showed that he can be an elite running back in the NFL. But then he's also been injured a lot. And as they say, the best ability is availability. So if he's not available,
that's a good quote.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like
it's true.
I feel like out of all the players in the NFL, right? I mean, this mainly pertains. Dalvin Cook is like one of the top players that you could say that about. I mean, is a beast, but he just hasn't been out there that much. And so hopefully he's healthy and ready to come back, hopefully he's 100% and everything and ready to go. We'll see. But I definitely would not be surprised if the Vikings were to win the division, even though I still am predicting the Bears to win the division. I guess my other main concern with this team is going to be Kirk Cousins. When I've watched him play football, he's had so many times where he'll have like an amazing game and you think, man, he's turning a corner and going to show that he can become an elite quarterback, but then he has some dud games at the same time. And you're thinking like, what happened, and with those weapons that he has on that team, he shouldn't be having that problem. So if Kirk Cousins can show me that he can be a great, consistent quarterback, then this team probably does win the division. But I just don't know if I trust that. Oh, Zach's pulling up a...
You like that?
You like that?
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah,
back
yeah.
in his Redskins day, that
They
was a
missed,
pretty famous. This
where he-
moment right here.
Yeah. Yeah. But so I do give the Vikings a ceiling the same as the Bears that I had with the NFC Championship appearance. I could see them definitely getting there, but if Kirk Cousins...
That'd be nice.
Zach's
Yeah.
distracting us here.
Zach, stop. You're distracting me.
All right.
You're interrupting my analysis. If you're not watching this on YouTube, Zach was just putting up some funny Kirk Cousins memes on the screen. But so I give the Vikings a ceiling of NFC Championship appearance. But I don't see them falling down as low as like we see the Packers falling. I'm going to give them a floor of like 8-8, 9-7, somewhere in there. But they definitely have potential to have a great season.
Yeah, so I was the only one in this group of four to put the Vikings lower than second place. And I think well, first of all, Eric's the rant guy around here, but I mentioned this in the last episode that this is a topic that I want to rant about someday. Is this the contracts that these quarterbacks are getting in the NFL? Like, I don't know what the Vikings were thinking when they gave Kirk Cousins that contract, but I mean, especially after the years that he had in Washington, it's just like, oh, let's pay this guy $86 million for his mediocre stats that he's put up in Washington. Like, okay, sure, that makes sense.
And also, they had quarterbacks too at the time. Like
Right. It's like they had three
Yeah.
quarterbacks. They had Case Keenum, Sam Bradford, and like Matt Castle, and they had let them all go
Teddy Bridgewater.
for Kirk Cousins. Yeah, and Teddy
Yeah.
Bridgewater. So, but yeah, I mean, I think Kirk Cousins is overrated, honestly. And sure, he had some performances, but like Eric mentioned, he has all these dud games too, where you're just like, what? Like, this guy's worth $86 million? Like, I don't know. But then the thing for me with Dalvin Cook is I definitely agree that he's a beast. But I think the big problem this year is the fact that if he gets hurt, there's no
That's
more
true.
Latavius Murray as his backup. Latavius Murray's gone. And Alexander Madison is obviously, they drafted him as a third-round pick, but he's unproven. He's an unproven rookie. And so and Latavius Murray had previously been a starter, and he's a good committee back, so he could take over that role when Cook got hurt. But if Cook gets hurt again, can Alexander Madison pick up the slack? Because, I mean, the other guys aren't. Michael Boone and Amir Abdullah aren't going to pick up the slack. So we'll see how that goes. And I would agree with that. Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs are probably the best wide receiver duo right now, just because we haven't seen Odell and Landry play yet. So I can't put them number one above Thielen and Diggs, especially after what they did last year. But yeah, and the defense for Minnesota, I mean, they took an interesting turn last year because the season before last, they were the number 2 defense behind Jacksonville. It was like both them and Jacksonville this year were supposed to have the best defenses. Yeah. And I don't know what happened to both of them, but they just disappeared. I mean, the Vikings defense was way less. I don't know if I want to say worse, but they just didn't perform at all to how they should have. And everybody was just kind of going, really? Like, and Mike Zimmer is a defensive-minded coach, so it was pretty surprising. Like, wow, like this is the defense for Minnesota? I mean, weren't they supposed to be like the number one defense this year? So, I mean, and I do agree that they still have the pieces there, but because they haven't lost anybody. I mean, it's all the same guys, Linville Joseph, and Anthony Barr, and Harrison Smith are all Pro Bowlers. Xavier Rhodes and Everson Griffin are both really good. And Eric Kendricks is a decent middle linebacker, but they just need to prove to me that they can work as a cohesive unit again and be a top 5 defense like they were a couple of years ago. And so that's kind of the reason why I'm not sold on this defense yet, and also on the offense, just the question marks. I mean, even though Thielen and Diggs are a great receiving duo, the question marks surrounding Dalvin Cook and Kirk Cousins are probably the reasons why I have them below Detroit and Chicago. But I did say that originally I had Minnesota above Detroit in second, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if they, were higher than third. So I'll give them a ceiling of, because since they have the pieces and if they can put it together, I would give them a ceiling of probably a divisional round loss, like winning the division but losing in the divisional round.
Okay.
And then I'd probably give them a floor of kind of where I have them right now, third place, like finishing 7-9 or so, like 6-10, 7 or 9, in third place in the division. So now we're going to move on to the final part of the episode with some quick current events here. So Wimbledon wrapped up a couple days ago, and unfortunately, I didn't actually get to watch this match. But if you just looking at the stat line there, this was an incredible, it was an incredible match. It was the longest final in Wimbledon history between Djokovic and Federer. I mean, and you see, Djokovic had to win a tiebreaker. It was so close in the 5th set, and it's unfortunate for me because I'm not a Djokovic fan at all. I mean, I used to not like Federer too much either because, you always kind of want to root against the guy who's so good. But I've more so in the last couple of years liked Federer just because he's 37 years old. And the fact that he's still performing at the level that he can is amazing to me. But still, regardless, a great final. The women's side was won by Halep. She beat Serena Williams. So there's all these questions around Serena Williams now, whether she can actually win another major. And she didn't just, if you look at that stat line, she lost both sets 6-2. So, Halep dominated that game. So I don't know what the future looks like for Serena, but hopefully she can win something else because, she's one of the greatest women's tennis players in history. And she's trying to chase that record for majors. I think she's at 23 right now, and the record is 24. So I'm hoping for her she can get there. But then moving on to NASCAR, once again, shout out to Michelle Batten on Facebook for that comment about wanting us to talk about NASCAR. They were at Kentucky this last weekend. Great. Kurt Busch wins the race, his first win of the season. And another win for Chevrolet. Not so much. I talked about last episode about a resurgence for Hendrick Motorsports, and didn't quite happen for them in this race. None of their guys finished in the top 10. So this was a better race for the Toyotas, Kyle Busch and Eric Jones being up there, and Denny Hamlin. Kentucky's always been, being an oval track is a bit more favorable to the Toyotas. But I was happy for Kurt Busch, and he's one of the elder statesmen in the sports. He's one of the last guys that you'd call like the old guard of NASCAR. So it was good to see. And the finish was good. I saw the finish, and him and Kyle, the two Busch brothers, were battling on the last lap for the win. And Kurt Busch just barely edged him out for the win. So that was nice to see for him. And he also gets a spot in the chase now for winning the race. So a guaranteed playoff spot for Kurt Busch. Then moving on to Formula One. Lewis Hamilton, his home Grand Prix at Silverstone in the UK. Mercedes just continuing their dominance. If you look at the stat line, Lewis Hamilton won the race by 24 seconds. And this is honestly another topic I could, since we don't cover F1 here, but as like a main sport, but another topic I could rant about is just how uncompetitive the season is this year. aside from Verstappen winning the race in Austria, it's been all Mercedes this year, and mainly Lewis Hamilton. I mean, not even Bottas. I think Bottas has won one race this year. And, especially within NASCAR, how at Daytona you had Justin Haley, of all people, won the race. I mean, how in the world did that happen? Nobody had ever seen that coming. But the thing is, you just don't see that in Formula One. You don't see guys outside of Mercedes or Red Bull or Ferrari, the top three teams. You don't see someone coming out of nowhere and winning the race. And obviously this year, it's unfortunate that it's just the same guy winning every race. Which, if you're a fan of him and if you're a fan of Mercedes, that's awesome. But if you're not, or if you're just not into the sport as much as people who are, and you're just kind of following it, it's like, well, this sucks. There's nothing to watch. It's just the same guy. And so then finally, to close it out, we don't. The NBA is not our main topic anymore, but sort of like the last big move. We thought the Kawhi Leonard move was going to be the last big thing for NBA free agency, but yeah, this is the Oklahoma City Thunder traded Russell Westbrook to the Houston Rockets for Chris Paul and for a couple draft picks. So since Eric is a fan of the Thunder, I'll let him give a little bit of his thoughts on how good he thought or bad he thought the move was.
Yeah, I'm just gonna rate this move as an okay move. I mean, the good thing is that while I know most Oklahoma City Thunder fans are probably upset that Russell Westbrook is gone, and I understand that with as long as he was on the team. But I've always felt like his triple doubles and stuff are very overrated. And especially with them moving on, or especially with them trading Paul George, it was an obvious sign that they are wanting to go into a rebuild. You're not going to win with just Russell Westbrook. So I was fine with them trading them, and they got some more first-round picks, which was nice. But, they got rid of one terrible contract, but then they just accumulated another terrible contract at the same time. So I don't see Chris Paul fitting in with the Thunder. I'm sure the Thunder, I've been hearing all kinds of rumors about them trying to trade him. Like Miami seems to be the number one rumor that people are talking about. But if I'm Miami, I'm not making a move for a $40+ million contract of a player that's like 34 years old. I wouldn't be doing that if I was them. So, like, I've heard that actually in order for the Heat to agree to make the move, that they want the Thunder to give them several first-round picks. And so then that wouldn't make sense for the Thunder to do that, because they accumulated all these draft picks for a reason, because they're trying to rebuild. And then if they give them all up to dump the Chris Paul contract, then they wouldn't
defeated the purpose.
Yeah, I know they wouldn't get. I know that they have like a buttload of draft picks, so I know they wouldn't be giving up all of them, but they would definitely have to give up a chunk, which, like Connor just said, would defeat the purpose of getting all of the draft picks. So, and then I've also heard rumors of them buying him out, but then that's a huge waste.
That's a lot of money.
That's a huge waste of money for no production. So, I feel like this move while they got some more draft picks, I feel like this move puts the Thunder in a bind, and it's going to be interesting to see how they get out of this, but I don't know. And I don't think the Thunder are even done yet, because in addition to getting rid of Chris Paul, I'm sure they're trying to trade Steven Adams as well. So they're still going to be busy, but I don't know. I'm basically, as I mentioned in the last episode too, after the Paul George trade, that I'm probably going to be in the same boat as Connor in terms of my team's probably going to suck this year. So
he's going to be eating those tacos with me.
Yeah, obviously while Connor lives in North Carolina and I live in Texas, won't be able to be together. But I'll take a walk and eat a taco and spirit with Connor at the same time during basketball season.
No April playoff watching for your team.
I'll just have to go into it with maybe if the Magic make it, I lived in Florida, so I'm cool with them, or maybe if Zach's Trailblazers get in. Nathan, are you a basketball fan? Who do you like in basketball, if you do?
I'm a Celtics fan. I'm a fan of all four of the Boston sports.
Okay, so I will.
Ooh.
I know that's not a popular take, but
While I normally would agree with Connor's boo there, since Boston did draft Grant Williams from Tennessee,
That's right.
I
Got a
might
full
be
connection.
looking. I'll be looking at Boston too. So I'm obviously not going to jump ship from the Thunder, but I'm curious to see how the Tennessee guys do. So it'll give me a lot of other stuff to pay attention to while the Thunder are in the basement dwelling down there. So.
Yeah, so real quick, I don't want to talk about the trade that much, but when I saw it, I shook my head for both sides, the Rockets and the Thunder side, because like the Thunder are getting Chris Paul with 2 draft picks, I think, but they're probably going to need to trade Chris Paul and 1 more draft pick just to get him out of there. So I don't know. It wasn't a great return for them, and then I don't think it's going to work between him and Harden in Houston. I'm not a fan of that combo. So
definitely be
Supposedly, it's
interesting.
where Russell Westbrook wanted to go, and that's why the Thunder traded him to
yeah,
there.
they gave him his wish, but
But
yeah.
at the same time, it's like him and James Harden play the exact same style. They both like to bring the ball up the court. They both like to get triple doubles. They both like to chase the stats.
They both hate playing defense.
I saw this funny little video on Twitter as a clip from that Will Ferrell basketball movie that he was in, where him and another guy are just like passing the ball back and forth to each other, and like then the comment was like both Russell Westbrook and James Harden trying to get the assist for the triple double.
Yeah.
Like
So
once you get that 10th assist, like they're gonna be holding on the ball the whole time though.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so that's gonna wrap up the podcast here. No rant this time because with the 4 of us, we didn't want to throw in like a 15-minute rant and extend the show too long. We're running about an hour 20, which is fine right now. But I don't want to give a review. Like I gave a review in the last episode. I was starting to do that. And I was like, wait, what am I doing?
Go watch the episode. Don't listen to Zach.
Yeah, that was kind of weird last time. But I mean, we end every video by saying, thank you to everybody who's listened, continues to listen. The continued support is great on Twitter and Facebook. And the NFC South is going to be the next one that we talk about. So next week, expect a video for that to come out.
Another highly competitive division.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I will say one thing before we go. Anthony and Alex podcast, if you guys are listening to this, and could you please follow Block Faux Life and Mr. CDog54? We followed you guys in the IFB follow trains on NBA Twitter, and you guys haven't followed us back. I believe you followed our main account with that Eric controls.
Yeah,
That's how they. That's how they got the question up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have followed you before, and you didn't follow us back. So if you are listening to this, that'd be awesome if you could do that, and no bad blood or anything. So, all right,
Wow.
so
Thanks for the good question.
to everybody else, thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. See y'all later.
See ya.
Peace.
Yeah.